Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hi, Maricella. It is great to see you or to hear you. I've been away, so I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while. How was Disney?
It was, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. There is so much to unpack, and we spent a lot of time with customer service. But the kids had a great time, and they did all the things they wanted to do, and it was fun. We had a good time.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's I big kudos to the people that go every year. I'm sure that they have lots of secrets and insights that we might not have fully been aware of. But yeah, the weather was good, and I have to give Disney, huge props for just like the fully immersive experiences that they create. There's Avatar in Animal Kingdom, the whole Star Wars area in Hollywood Studios, Winnie the Pooh now, and the Seven Dwarfs and all of that, and Magic Kingdom. I mean, across the board, it's just these immersive experiences that I think if you're someone who doesn't really ride rides like me, you still get so much out of it because you feel like you're just transported to this different space, and it's just fun. And I had said going there that I wanted to move my body, which I did. I walked like over 50 miles in the span of a week. I wanted to, have different inputs, sights and sounds and experiences, and I absolutely did. And it was, in many ways, very cathartic. The kids were fantastic. So yeah, we had a great time.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm sure the kids loved it. And it is, I mean, I really like Disney. I know it's a lot. I hadn't been in years until last year. So I get what you're saying. The lands they've created, wow, it's so incredible. You really are transported somewhere else. So what was your favorite thing?
What was my favorite thing? Well, I liked, of course, I liked the Toy Story Land at Hollywood Studios.
Oh, yeah, so cool.
I mean, because just everything is just huge, and that's just, yeah, I mean, that's great. I did like the Ratatouille ride at Epcot, even though I get super motion sickness or had to keep closing my eyes. I like the different spaces where I feel really small in a ride or in a land. It's a different perspective. I mean, you just see things differently. So those were two of my favorites. Zoe, my youngest, who's 7, was an absolute thrill ride junkie. I mean, she was going on Splash Mountain and Space Mountain, and every roller coaster she could find, she was on it multiple times. And that was really fun too. She did Tower of Terror. She just couldn't get enough of it. And it was Zoe and my other niece. They're 9 months apart, so they're both 7. And they were eating it up. So that was fun to see them too have so much fun.
I love that. I really do. I'm so happy Zoe enjoyed it. I can imagine her. I am not surprised. She's a little thrill seeker. Not
yes,
surprised at all.
The gymnast who likes to fly through the air.
Yeah,
she was good. And of course, Morgan, is a huge Star Wars. She's Darth Vader's biggest fan. So
yeah.
she had a lot of fun there, and it was just, yeah. I mean, it was quite the experience. But I keep saying I give these kids a lot of credit because we went to park 6 days in a row. 3 of them, we were the first ones in the park. We were there before it opened, and all 6 days we were the last people out. We were not walking out the gates until half hour after the parks closed.
Oh my god!
So we're talking 14-hour days, and they just there were no tears, there's no complaining. They were just running and having fun, enjoying it, and I think a big part of that is this is our first trip post-COVID. Our first trip where we weren't just, seeing family and staying close to home. And so they really, soaked it all in as well. And it's good for me as a parent to see how much, how quickly they bounce back into traveling and that whole experience, but just how much they appreciated it as well. I think that this is a year where we'll see a lot of progress towards, going, I don't want to say back to the way we were, because let's hope that, in many ways we don't move backwards. We're continuing to move forward and to create new experiences and new ways of doing things. But, I do think that this is a year where we're going to be opening our eyes and our minds in many different ways. And to see my kids really embrace that was great.
That's so cool. I'm really happy you guys went. I'm really happy you had a good time. And I am impressed because those are long days. And that's a lot of walking and a lot of being active. So that's great. And I agree with you. Let's hope that we don't go back to exactly like how things were. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think we are forever changed by the last few years. But I do agree that this year we'll see some stuff coming up like a little bit like before.
Yeah, well, and you've been moving your body too. I know you just had the half marathon down in Florida. We missed our geographic windows. We weren't there at the same time, but how did that go?
Yeah, it was. So it's been a few weeks, a couple of weeks, but you and I haven't actually had a chance to talk, which is so funny because we were kind of, I was gone, then you were gone. But it was hard. I have to say, it was, I finished. I've been telling, using a lot of running metaphors in my Rising Leaders Roundtable. It was really, really hard mentally for me. I was in Florida. We had just been, COVID, and there really COVID restrictions and COVID, like how people deal with COVID, is very different from how it is in New York. So it was a little bit of like a shock to be everywhere, like see people without masks, or we were at the corral like right before the race, and it was, my friend and I were two people wearing masks and like packed with people around us who were not. So that kind of was a shock. And then the thing with running is you can train however much you want, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to how your body reacts on race day and how your mind reacts on race day. And it was hot. It was sunny. There were portions of the race where there was no shade at all. I struggled. My mind kind of hit a wall. I started to crumble around mile 3, which is like super early. Kind of feeling like I was not doing my best, and I started being really hard on myself, which as well as I do. We all do at some point, right? We all do it for different things. And so I started being hard on myself for running. And the truth is, like, instead of realizing I'm running because I enjoy it and because I set this goal for myself, I started comparing myself to other people, and that just made me sink like further down in my energy levels. And by mile 8, I felt like I couldn't keep going. It's nice to see people that and I saw a friend of mine cheering, and I could some of the people from our team, like Allison, who leads our enterprise team, or Joanna, who's in our product team, they texted me while I was running, and so my AirPods were reading the text out loud as I was running, and it really helped to hear like words of encouragement even from a distance, because once your brain gets to the point of like, I don't know if I can do it, you need that like support from the outside world, not just from you need to pull from somewhere else. I finished. I wasn't the last one to finish, which was good. um, I finished at a decent time for my running, for like my speed currently, but it was rough. I'm not gonna lie. I questioned if I wanted to ever do this again for many, many a times as I was running. I questioned what the hell I was doing. I even questioned like why I was living in New York. It was just a lot. But yet, after a while you start seeing it with, you know, hindsight 2020. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I ran. I finished. And I'm not off running. I mean, I'm sitting here all sweaty. I just came back from a run.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm back at it. I'm going to run the New York City half in a few weeks and see if New York is nicer to me than Miami.
Probably. I mean, the humidity or lack thereof helps.
Yeah, and the cold. It's gonna be like colder than it was over there.
And it was the New York half of 2020 that we were scheduled to run together, right?
Yep.
And then that got shut down, obviously due to COVID.
Yeah.
So
And
maybe
that's
maybe what I was saying before is true. I mean, 2022, we are, kind of coming full circle, but moving forward in new and different ways.
yeah. You're very right. We are coming full circle. I I keep this is why I keep struggling with this is because when I was running for training for that marathon and for that half marathon in 2020, I was in shape. Like I felt good. I was running at a really great pace. I was, the fittest I've ever been in my life. And now I'm not. The 2.5 years of COVID have not been kind. And I'm running several minutes per mile slower than I was at that point. So, one of the things about coming full circle and seeing this half marathon effort is I know I have to see it with a different perspective and with fresh eyes. Like, it's not 2020. I'm not who I was in 2020. The world is not what it was in 2020. And that's okay. Like, I have to have some grace and give myself some grace to be where I am now. And it's hard. I know you're the same way. We're very hard on ourselves a lot of the times. And I don't know. It's kind of a lesson in like letting go.
I mean, but it is, and in work and in life, which are so intertwined in so many ways. I don't know if we always see them as intertwined. I mean, we talk about grit and resilience. Our guest today, actually, Whitney Johnson, had talked about this S curve of life, where you kind of you start something new and you're learning and you're growing and it's a bit intimidating, and then you hit your stride and you're doing great, and then you kind of get to the top of the S and you've you're ready for that next challenge, that next risk. And in life, we don't always acknowledge that. Life's just happening, and we don't take that moment to stop and to think about it. And here, you're hitting the top of the S curve back 2 years ago, and now that S curve is something different, and you're I think in that point where you're pushing yourself and it's harder and it's more of a challenge, but you're gonna reach that peak where you accomplish this, and accomplish means many different things, right? Success is not defined in one way, and then you go on to that next thing, and all of these are pushing you to keep going on to that next challenge, that next progression, that next opportunity. But it's important to really talk about this, and I appreciate, Maricella, how open and honest you're being, because it is hard. Like, we set expectations for ourselves and we don't always meet them. And, we oftentimes can be our own worst enemy, and that voice is in our head. And just being able to have these honest conversations about how we navigate those times and how we use them to, push us forward, and sometimes to just recenter us, to cause us to really question some of these doubts we're putting on ourselves, and to reframe that. That's all important, and it's important aspects of how we come away from this time and move into the future with that fresh perspective that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sharing my experience. So just because, you know, I think we all have to talk about what we hit and when and where we struggle, and know that at the end of the day, it's not just us. We're all facing different challenges, and we're all there to support each other.
Oh, it's so true. It is absolutely true, and it's something that our guest today, Whitney Johnson, who is the CEO of the tech-enabled talent company Disruption Advisors, talks about quite a bit. She just came out with her latest book, which is called Smart Growth: How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Company. And in light of what we're talking about here, I mean, it really is about investing in your own well-being, right? Me, we, world. Like, how are we supporting ourselves? how we supporting our teams and the people that really drive our companies. And Maricella and I talk so much about the importance of really seeing your employees as your greatest asset and really acknowledging that and supporting that. And so when you help to grow your people and see that as a way to grow your company, it's, I think, an important repositioning away from, the product or the money centered mindset. And you really see what are the drivers of growth. And growing your people is oftentimes just what we're talking about here. It's, they're going to face challenges and setbacks. There'll be times when they're unmotivated, times when they, need a little bit of grit or support that, the text in their ear as they're running that's saying, I'm cheering for you and I'm, so excited for you. It's all of these things that help us on that marathon that we're each running. And if you can help grow your people, then you'll be growing your company as well.
Absolutely. 100%. You're talking about grit, and I just have to share this. This is really funny. You were gone last week, so I don't know if you saw the whole debacle on Slack. So last week, the Rising Leaders Roundtable, and this is last week of when we're taping this, not when this is airing, but the Rising Leaders Roundtable was all about grit and growth mindset. And so I wake up the day of the roundtable, and I have an email from the guest expert that she had an emergency and couldn't do it. And so, like a few hours before the session, I'm like, what am I gonna do? Can I find someone so quickly? And I decided to be gritty. I did some research. I put something together, and I did it myself. But it goes to show that I don't know. We can do a lot of things if we set our mind to it.
That is absolutely true. And I did see that, and I also saw how much everyone was saying you rocked it. So congrats, that's amazing. Now let's get to my interview with Whitney Johnson. Whitney, hello and welcome back to the Ellevate podcast.
Kristy, I'm so happy to be here.
You are our only 3-time guest on the podcast, and I'm thrilled to have you back. Every time I leave just inspired and energized to take on the next thing, and so thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, and they say 3 times a charm, so let's see if we can have it be charming.
I'm sure we will. So Whitney, refresh our listeners, and I encourage all of our listeners to go back and listen to some of Whitney's previous episodes, but refresh our listeners a little bit on who you are and your story.
Okay, so I will do the Reader's Digest version. So my story is that I was a music major. I moved to New York right out of school because I had gotten married, so it wasn't a big plan to move there. And needed to work because my husband was in school, and I discovered Wall Street. And I started actually as a sales assistant to a retail broker and discovered, wow, Wall Street's really exciting. So I started taking business courses at night and had a boss who believed in me, which we all know in financial services don't do things like what my boss did, which was move me from being a secretary to an investment banker. And then I moved from investment banking to equity research. And then I left Wall Street, I thought forever. I disrupted myself to become an entrepreneur. But then I started or co-founded an investment firm with Clayton Christensen at the Harvard, the late Clayton Christensen at the Harvard Business School, where we were investing in disruptive innovation, and did that for about 5 years. But then in 2012, I really felt like and wanted to chase down this idea of disruption that we had been applying to products and services and companies and countries, because Clayton's the father of disruption, and said, I think this and I want to apply this to people. I want to understand what disruption looks like for people. I like applying management theories to people. I did that also with the S Curve of learning, which we should definitely talk about today. And this idea that a silly little thing can take over the world. You can disrupt yourself. And that is the mechanism by which we make progress, by which we grow. And when we grow and we're feeling effective, we live these happy, meaningful lives. So now I have this business disruption advisors where we have this tool that allows people to see where they are in their growth. And we do coaching and consulting and advise companies around growing their people to grow their company. So that is my Reader's Digest version of my career to date.
Well, I love that. And I want to call out that you as a music major and myself as an English and sociology double major, we both went into investment banking out of school. And I call that out because I do think that if we're talking about disruption, companies that aren't just following some mold, and for us, to take on roles that maybe we aren't easily connected to maybe a major that we had. But I mean, it's all about learning. It's about growth. It's about finding the things that inspire you and energize you and interest you. And so always take that leap.
Right. And I think also finding people who are willing to take a chance on you, right? When you show that initiative, people who are willing to give you a shot, because we have to take the initiative. And now we're at the stage in our career where we find people who take initiative and then take a shot on them.
Are you still in touch with that manager from your first job?
I'm not anymore, but his name is Cesar Baez, and whenever I get a chance, like right now, I'd like to give him a shout out because he gave me such a wonderful gift of just saying, you know what, I'm going to move you from being a secretary to a banker. And it was very unconventional. This is like the early 90s. And so, but it was trajectory changing for me. So I will always be grateful to him.
Oh, that's amazing. So, Whitney, talk to us about the S curve. We discussed it on one of our previous episodes, and I mentioned to you before we started taping, I reference this all the time. I mean, to me, this is the magic secret that unlocks so much about, how we are approaching and feeling within these different stages of our career, maybe what's holding us back. So can you share a little bit about the S curve? And then I want to make sure we get into your new book, which is sure to be inspiring to all of us.
Okay, so you were asking me to talk about one of my favorite topics in the entire world, and that is what growth looks like. So the S curve of learning is the S curve itself was popularized by Rogers in 1962 to figure out how quickly an innovation would be adopted. And the big insight that I had as we were using it in investing was that the S curve could help us understand what growth looks like, how we grow. That whenever we start something new, we're at the bottom or the base of that S, the launch point, and it tells us, the S curve math tells us that growth will be slow, but once we put in the effort, you're going to move into what we call the sweet spot, where your growth will not only be fast, it will feel fast. And then as you approach mastery and you're very, very good at something, because you're no longer learning, you can get bored. And so growth not only feels in it is slow. So slow, fast, slow is how you grow. And once you know where you are in your growth, whether as an individual, whether as a team, whether as a company, then you know what to do next. And so it becomes this map for you to think about your life, your career. And actually, I would argue that our life itself is an S curve and a series of S curves. So that's what it is. It's map for us to think about the emotional journey and arc of growth.
Can you give our listeners an example of an S curve you've personally experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. So we alluded to this earlier. So when I was working on Wall Street, I had been an equity analyst. And by the way, I was disrupted into being an equity analyst. So I had been in investment banking. My boss got fired, and they probably would have fired me too, but I was pregnant and I had good performance reviews. So they just shoved me onto a new S curve in equity research. But it turned out to be career making for me. But what happened is I started at the launch point of that S curve. And initially I had no idea what I was doing. I had to build I knew how to build a model, but I had to build a model. I had to make a stock call. Is it a buy? Is it a sell? And early on, I was so afraid that I was going to make a wrong call. I had a boss or a colleague say to me I was a shrinking violet, that I needed to make a call. So all those experiences that you would have at the launch point of a curve where you feel like you're completely out of your depth. But I worked very, 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 very hard and eventually was able to move into the sweet spot of an S where I thought, I'm pretty good at this. I was able to spot momentum. I could build good models. I became an institutional investor ranked analyst. I was ranked number 1 in media and number 2 in telecom. And so double ranked in these 2 categories, felt like this exhilaration of it's hard, but not too hard, but easy, not too easy. But then after 8 years, I've been an equity analyst. I've been institutional investor ranked for 8 years. And I go to my boss and because I have this feeling there's something more for me. And I say, I want to do something new. I need a new challenge. I feel like I wouldn't have said this then, but I feel like I'm at the top of my S curve. And my boss says to me, well, effectively, we like you right where you are. And so at this point, I've now read The Innovator's Dilemma. I've had this kernel of an idea that the theory of disruption isn't just about products, it's also about services. And so I disrupted myself. I decided that I was going to jump to the bottom of a new S curve and become an entrepreneur. So it helped me have this explanatory mechanism for the experience I was having of discouragement and then exhilaration and then boredom. And it helped me then know, well, it didn't help me then, but now it helps me explain what was happening in that psychological, emotional journey that I was undergoing.
I love it. And why is it that, jumping off that S curve is oftentimes so intimidating or scary?
Oh, well, why is jumping off a mountain scary? I mean, it's when you're at the top of an S curve, it's interesting because you have this real predicament because on the one hand, you are bored. You feel like you're stagnating and you feel like there's something more for you. And you also have this well-oiled, I'm mixing metaphors. You've got this neural pathway that is very, very thick. There is routine, this super highway of habit. So you're very bored and you're not happy, but it's also extremely uncomfortable. So there's this real predicament. And so you look at it and you say, if I do something new, it means that even though I'm bored, I'm going to be really uncomfortable. That's kind of scary. And so you have to get to the point where if you look at loss aversion theory from Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, is that the risk of staying where you are becomes greater than the risk of moving. And for them, the loss aversion goes 2.2 times. So the reward has to be 2.2 times greater than the loss. And so that's what happens when you finally get to that point where you're willing to disrupt yourself. You basically say, what will I lose if I stay here? And what I will lose is greater than what I will lose if I jump, basically.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. And that really puts it into perspective. I think that is the key question. What will I lose if I stay here? And here could be, it could be, like you said, going to another role within your organization, the next step up, starting your own thing. There's so many next things, weighing the cost of staying versus the cost of taking that risk and jumping off. So Whitney, you are now out with your third book, Smart Growth, How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Company. And the timing couldn't be better. We are in this time when companies are thinking about growth, leaders are thinking about growth, our employees are thinking about it. We're in the midst of, the great resignation where people are leaving their roles to find fulfillment, to find the next thing, to, our values and priorities have shifted. There's just so much happening in this ecosystem. And for you to come in talking about this smart growth, and what that means for you and for people in your organization, couldn't be more timely. So could you share a bit about your book and what it's all about?
Sure. So I did get a little bit lucky. So let's just acknowledge and honor that. But what I will say is I think COVID, there are many things that were very difficult about the pandemic, but one of the gifts that it gave us is that everyone was pushed off an S curve when the pandemic came, the S curve of our life pre-pandemic. And while that was very challenging for all of us in different ways, some more than others, it meant that we were now moving. We were no longer on the proverbial couch. We were now up and with our shoes on, and we were walking and we were moving. And so that has given us tremendous momentum. And for many people who said, okay, I realized that I got pushed off this curve and it was super uncomfortable, but I did it. And the way I was living, it was good, but I think there might be something more. So there's a real gift in that. The book itself it's titled Smart Growth, and it's this idea of the S curve, which I had in my prior two books, kind of in the background. It's now front and center. And so what it does is it gives you this map for what growth looks like. And I walk through the launch point and the sweet spot and mastery, but then I break those down even further. So I say, whenever you're at the launch point, the first phase is exploration. So you might have been pushed on this curve, you might have chosen to be on this curve, but you now need to explore and decide, do I want to stay on this desert island a little bit longer? And so there's an important phase of exploration of asking questions. Does this fit with my identity? Is it hard but not too hard? Does it fit and square with my purpose? And if that answer that you pass through that gate, then you go into the collector phase where you're collecting lots of data, the quantitative data, the qualitative data, to say to yourself, okay, can I make a go of this S curve? I think I want to be here, but can I actually build momentum along this curve? And you're still at the launch point, but you're collecting that data where you're starting to build momentum so that you can then either move to a different one, because no S curve is ever wasted, or stay on this one and move into that sweet spot. Then you get into the sweet spot where you've got that accelerator where things are going fast and you're figuring it out and you're building momentum. And with self-determination theory, you're feeling competent, you're feeling the sense of relatedness, you're feeling the sense of autonomy, like I can do this, I can figure this out. And then as you move through that sweet spot, you get into the metamorph stage where it's no longer what you did, whatever this new thing it is you were doing, it's now starting to be who you are. So metamorphosis. And then you move into mastery. And there are two phases of mastery. There's the anchor, where you have now anchored this behavior, who you wanted to be. It's part of who you are. So when I first started as an equity analyst, it's like I wanted to be an equity analyst. I wanted to be a stock picker, but I wasn't one yet. In anchor phase, in the mastery phase, you say, I am an equity analyst, I am a stock picker, and I am good at this. And then the final stage is mountaineer, where you are in this place, this plateau could become a precipice. You're at the top of the mountain and you have to decide, are you going to keep climbing? And so this is the place where you make that decision. Okay, I'm here, I celebrated, I anchored. Now it's time for me to either say new curve or a summit, not the summit, and keep climbing. And when you can successfully complete that growth cycle, because all parts of that growth cycle are about being a peak performer, then you are in a position to be effective not only in your career but in your life, because you understand again what growth looks like. And when you're smart about growth, then you're actually you can get serious about growth.
So I'm full of questions for you about this, Whitney. My first question is, when you were talking about some of those points to raise to yourself, those questions to ask yourself, I don't know how I would answer that. I don't know how I would answer those questions. They're complicated, and I think you really have to do some soul searching to understand, what that means for you. Is that a valid point? I mean, is that something that you hear?
Well, I think the answer is, I think it's complicated and it's not, because while it's partly complicated because there are, a myriad of choices or curves that we could be on, but it's also not complicated in the sense of, like, if I decide that I really want to get into physical shape, you look at it and you say, well, I could become a UFC fighter, I could go climb Mount Everest, or I can start running. And well, I could climb Everest, but I'm not going to. And I'm not going to become a UFC fighter, and I'm probably not going to go play cricket. So there are actually lots and lots and lots of options that we can discard pretty quickly. So the choice set isn't quite as broad as it seems. I think, though, to your question about does it align with our purpose, I do think that we have a greater sense of our purpose and what we care about than we think we do. But I would agree with you that our purpose does expand and refine and become clearer as we go along. But this is the beauty of it, is that because no S curve is ever wasted, we're going to be on a lot of S curves in our life, and we're going to try out a lot. And that's why sometimes you take your first job and you leave your first job after a year, because you don't know what S curve you want to be on in your career. And that's okay, because the entire process, the process of being on the launch point, is actually very valuable in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it often. I mean, people will come to me and they're looking for something new, a new role, or a new opportunity, and I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And it's always like, I could do anything in these, industries and these capacities, and and it's so broad. And I'm just going to keep directing people to your books, Whitney, because I think that this is the process we have to go through to narrow down and refine. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one specific thing.
I agree, Kristy, and I think
to focus that.
And I think it's very, and you kind of said this, it's very iterative. I mean, when I first graduated from college, I wanted to be a flight attendant. Like, I went and I applied to American Airlines, and I didn't even make it past the first round. And I was devastated that I didn't get to be a flight attendant. And now I think, oh, I'm really glad that I didn't get the job, because I get to do something else that's turned out to be so much more satisfying than I think that would have been for me. Even though it would have been super nice to travel a lot, I think it would have been very difficult for me to be patient with so many people on an airplane. But I thought I really wanted it. So I do think that there's this iterative process that we go through. And ideally, I think that's why so many people don't hit their stride till they're in their 40s and 50s and 60s, because they're iterating and jumping to new S curves. And then finally, at some point, from a life perspective, you hit that sweet spot. And I don't think they call it middle age for nothing. Like 40s, 50s, and 60s, I think that's the sweet spot of your life, because you finally figured out who you want to be and what you want to do. And so it's okay in your 20s and 30s when you don't actually know for sure what you want to do.
I mean, I'll amplify that point, because I just had a birthday. I'm 44, and it dawned on me. I'm like, I still have 20 years in my career.
At least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about a little over 20 in, and I'm halfway through, and it was just this, like, I don't know, it was wow, to me. I'm like, wow. I mean, I have so much ahead of me, and so many things, so many S curves to be on, and it's exciting. It's exciting to think about how your future ends up, and how each I love this idea of the multiple S curves, because you have to keep going through that process, to keep moving forward. And there's no wrong one, right? I mean, you try something, it doesn't work, that leads you to the next thing. And it's about seeing it as a multitude of just, movements versus a straight line or something else.
Yeah, I think it's thrilling. And I remember Bob Proctor, who we actually had on our podcast a few months ago, and he's sort of the generation pre-Anthony Robbins about human potential, and he's now in his late 80s, and he said, calm down but don't slow down. And I love that idea of, for me, I think about this a lot of, as we get older, as we want to get calmer, we want to get more serene, more comfortable with who we are and how we show up in the world, but we don't want to slow down. And that to me is exciting, because I think the calmer we are, the faster we can actually move along our S curves and have more S curves and more fulfilling, so that we're sprinting to the end of our lives. And that gets me really, really excited. And like you said, you're about to turn 44. You've got, if you want, probably another 30 years to really, and maybe even 40, to really contribute in a meaningful way. And that's super exciting.
Yes, I'm smiling. You can't see me, but yes. I mean, but so then there's this concept of time, right? Time, I mean, we're talking about,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, have 30, 40 years, but also this time moving through the S curve, and the time to kind of do that self-reflection and ask yourself the questions and then take the leap to the next, the next S curve. I oftentimes hear, I mean, you used an example about, getting in shape, but in my mind, one of the biggest barriers to that, or at least the excuse I use, is time. I don't have time. Or I don't have time to spend, to devote to thinking about what's next, or to answering these questions, or to doing the research for that role, or to, whatever that is, to setting up the company, to that next. So how do you respond to that around how do we make time and prioritize time to really do this?
Oh, I have a good answer for you on this one. So I would say, I mentioned a minute ago how we've got these really thick neural pathways and this, routine of like super comfortable way of living each day. And if you think about it, every day is an S curve, right? It's a fractal, right? You can think about this pattern over and over again. And so whenever you think about doing something new, it's more like a cow path. And so that cow path, it is, there's mud and it's super difficult to, make your way along that cow path. And what I have found, so a few years ago, I had interviewed James Clear, Atomic Habits, on my podcast. And he talks about this idea of small, ridiculously small goals. And I really took that to heart. So on the topic of running, and then we'll talk about another S curve in just a second. But on topic of running, I was like, okay, I'm going to become a runner. And so when I did that, I didn't decide I was going to run 30 minutes every day, because no way was that going to happen. Because remember, I've got this neural pathway of I have 30 minutes that's already allocated to lots of other things in the course of my day. I didn't even do 15 minutes. I said I'm going to run 5 minutes a day for a week, and I'm going to run for 30 seconds and I'm going to walk for 30 seconds. Now, I could have made it even simpler, but I was already walking a lot. But I could have just said I'm going to put on my tennis shoes every day for a week. So that what was happening is I was giving this place for these neural pathways to give this cow path some space so that my identity could start to shift just enough so that I could start to say, this is what I do every day. And I'm going to increase by 10 seconds tomorrow. Oh, I did that yesterday. It was super easy, so I can do it again tomorrow. So you break it down into these ridiculously small goals. Another one that I'm doing right now is I'm obsessed, thank you to COVID and my daughter, with Korean dramas. And so I thought, I want to learn a little bit of Korean. So I got out Duolingo and I thought, all right, well, I'm not going to take a class, but I made a goal that for 21 days straight, I was going to do 5 minutes of a Korean app on my phone, which everybody has 5 minutes. And I've done it now for 20 straight days. And you know what the app told me? Only 4% of the people that start get that far. So to you, Kristy, who I know you still have young children, when it comes to wanting to be on the launch point of a new curve, do something so small, so ridiculously small. Sometimes, like I have a goal to play the piano, I will maybe play for 5 seconds every day, but I met the goal. And so I'm creating those neural pathways. So make it really, 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 really small and time box it. And then you will start to move on to new curves.
Whitney, do you know Sandra Zucker?
No, who's that? No,
Well, I mentioned her. She's also a researcher, and she was recently on my podcast, but she also talked about Korean dramas, and she Crash Landing on You is one she mentioned. So
yes,
I wrote it down. We're going to look at it next.
I have seen it. I can give you a list of ones. Just hit me up. But yes, Crash Landing on You was very good. One that we really loved was Romance is a Bonus Book. You can try that one as well.
Okay, Romance is a Bonus Book.
Mm-hmm.
No, she said that I asked her about subtitles versus dubbing, and she said no, she always does subtitles.
Oh yeah,
now she
absolutely
is picking up all the words in Korean.
Absolutely, subtitles, and also you get the emotion as well. Like we'll even have the subtitles on, and we can't hear them. And I'm like, turn it up because you want to hear the emotion in their voice.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So then, Whitney, I'm curious about how we then do what people have done for you and for me. You mentioned in your career, help our employees to grow as well, because I think that's really scary for managers and for leaders to think, okay, if I'm supporting my employees in growth, then that means they're going to leave. That means that they're going to grow out of us and go to the next thing. And personally, I mean, from a values-based perspective, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it's a great thing. But how do we apply this to then supporting others in this process?
Yeah. So I think that part of what I love about this as this simple visual model that we are highly visual is that it allows us to make it feel less personal when someone does decide that they want to move on. Um, so you can now have this conversation and say, okay, in fact, I'll give you an example. So a company called Chatbooks, they turn photos from Instagram into books, and I'm on the advisory board. And we recently administered our insight tool for their management team because a number of them have been there for a while. And one of the people who's on the team, her name is Rachel Hofstetter. She's been the chief marketing officer there for about 7 years. And when she took the S curve and we had this workshop, she felt this great sense of relief because she was able to now articulate and have a conversation with the founders, Nate and Vanessa Quigley, and just say, it's not that I don't love chat books and it's not that I don't love you. It's just that I'm at the top of my S curve. And so you then have this way to talk to your people, for them to talk to you so that it's not about you and them wanting to move on. The second thing I would say to that is if they're unhappy, they're going to leave at some point anyway, or they'll get complacent, and that's worse. And so wouldn't you rather be the boss that people love? Wouldn't you rather be my Cesar Baez? Or you probably had a boss like that where for, decades later, they're still saying that you were the best boss that they ever had because you gave them that possibility of growth. And then the third thing I would say is if you're struggling with that, it means that you're feeling difficulty being on your own S curve and wanting to cling to that. And read that article. And I'm sure you've talked about this on this podcast, Kristy, is giving away your Legos and other lessons for entrepreneurs. Is that part of allowing people to grow? If you're willing to grow yourself and if you're willing to give away your Legos and you're continuing to develop, then you're much more willing and able to allow the people around you to grow, either to grow into your role or to grow somewhere else, because you know that there will always be other people who will come along and help you grow. And so it's just this ever expanding process of, vast networks of A teams. So that's what those are a couple of musings on that.
Whitney, it is always amazing to chat with you. I'm like writing notes. I've got so much stuff to do. This is fantastic. The first thing is buying your book, but I wanted to end with a couple quick questions to get to know you better. What is your favorite day of the week?
Oh, Friday.
That is a favorite. I can say anecdotally that Friday is a favorite. Who would be your dream dinner guest?
Brene Brown.
Yeah, that is a good one. Do you have any pet peeves?
Yes. People littering.
You know what? Yes. I was walking down the street the other day and someone just dropped like a cup or something on the street. And I was like, what? You're like, oh my gosh. And then I like had this moral dilemma. Should I pick it up? But it's COVID and I didn't have gloves or hand sanitizer on me at the moment. And I was like, what do I do? But yes. What is a favorite recent read?
A favorite recent read? Okay. It's a book. Actually, I haven't even finished it, but I'm reading it right now. Okay. It's called Once Upon a Wardrobe, and it's by Patty Callahan, and I'm just in the middle of it, but it's kind of like fan fiction for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Ooh.
And it's just delightful.
Excellent. That is also reminding me that we should watch that over the holiday season. Great series. Okay, Whitney, and can you share with our listeners here today where they can find your book and a final thought you want to leave them with?
Oh, yeah. So I would say you can go to my website, whitneyjohnson.com, and you can find my book, Smart Growth. And yes, thank you for pre-ordering it. That would be super lovely. We have made a goal to have it be on a bestseller list. And so for anybody who's willing to buy it, that will help. So thank you. And then my final thoughts, I was going to say any final thoughts. My final thoughts are just think about this S curve and where you are on the S curve. And if you, in the areas of your life where you're on the launch point, be patient and kind to yourself. so that when you're feeling uncomfortable or frustrated, and not doing things as well as you'd like them to do, just remember, oh yeah, this is normal, and good job me, because I'm doing something new and uncomfortable.
Perfect. Yes. Good job, you. Good job, me. Good job, all of us. We are doing amazing work right now, even if sometimes it feels like we're stuck. Let's keep moving forward and supporting each other in doing that. And thank you, Whitney, so much for being on the Ellevate podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kristy. It's always so much fun.
All right, welcome back, Maricella. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Whitney Johnson as much as I did. So much to unpack there, and lots to learn as we work to support our teams and grow our businesses.
Whitney's great. I mean, every time she's on the podcast, she's been on it a couple times before. She shares so much knowledge, and I learned something new.
Yeah. Yes, there's definitely a reason that she's one of the 50 leading business thinkers in the world, as named by Thinkers 50. I would love to spend some time in her brain and everything that's going on there. But fortunately, we get to tap into her knowledge on the podcast. So that was a lot of fun. And, at Ellevate, we talk a lot about the importance of, tapping into shared expertise, learning from one another, and making space for those conversations. So beyond the podcast, we are continuing to learn from thought leaders and experts to get inspired and to do the work to become the leaders and professionals and humans that we want to be. This happens every week at our roundtables, and at our upcoming executive roundtable, we're making space to build connections, especially in this virtual world. And I think particularly once you become more senior in your career, it's harder and harder to really meet those peers, other executives, C-suite leaders, business owners who face similar challenges, but also are connected to opportunities, to insights, and to expertise. And so at our executive roundtable, we always make sure we make space for those real networking opportunities and connections to happen. And that's what we'll be doing at the next executive roundtable, which is every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I really hope you'll join us.
At the Rising Leaders Roundtable on Thursday at noon, we'll be talking about something that I think we all struggle with. And the title of the session is How Not to Say That's Okay. I'll just do it myself.
Yes, very true. We do struggle with that. I struggle with that. And then at our entrepreneur and business owner roundtable, we'll be talking about PR tactics to get your unfair share of attention. Yes, we need more stories about women and women leaders and business owners. And this is a great way to learn some of those tactics to get the exposure that you deserve. So join us at our weekly roundtables. You can go to ellevatenetwork.com to learn more. We'd love to see you, and I can assure you it will be the best hour of your week. Now, let's dive into our firsts. This is a first Olympic edition. Did you watch the Olympics, Maricella?
I did not.
Oh, Maricella.
I know.
We did. We're definitely an Olympic watching household, although I did read that the viewership was the lowest it had ever been. So I guess many people shared your sentiment.
Well, to my credit, it's Winter Olympics. And yeah, I didn't grow up with any winter sports in mind.
True. Fair. Very fair. Well, no, I enjoyed it. And there were some great firsts. Snowboarder Chloe Kim became the first woman to win back-to-back golds in the Olympic halfpipe.
Yep. Erin Jackson became the first Black woman to win an Olympic medal in speed skating, and it was gold.
She is phenomenal. I loved that race. It was amazing. Figure skater Haley Kops became the first Orthodox Jewish woman to compete for Israel at the Winter Olympics.
I love that. Sarah Nurse became the first Black woman to win hockey gold at the Olympics.
Jessie Diggins became the first U.S. woman to win an individual Olympic medal in cross-country skiing.
Snowboarder Zoe Sadowski-Synnott won New Zealand's first ever gold medal at the Winter Olympics.
Yes, that was also a phenomenal showing there. Is always just amazing. Kelly Curtis became the first Black U.S. skeleton racer to compete in the Olympics.
Abby Rock became the first female Indigenous hockey player to play for Team USA at the Olympics. I love a lot of these intersectional firsts.
Yes. Yeah, I think, yes. I don't even know what else to say that I think, because, we have talked so much about, when we look at our community, right, and Ellevate's the community of women in the workplace, and we want to see women succeed in the workplace and in the world, and we believe in the impact that women have in creating change and creating progress and a better place to work and to live. But it's to just focus on it, as change for women, driven by women, really limits the understanding of the work that has to be done and how we support one another. And so the intersectional lens is a must-have way to look at gender equity and equality in the workplace and the world. We have to go deeper and to really understand and internalize and work for change for individuals, particularly individuals that are disproportionately impacted by the world in which we live. And so we always strive to make space for these conversations every day, and as part of every conversation we have, because if we're not talking about the intersectional nature of our world, then we're not really talking about our world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, next week we have a great conversation on the Ellevate podcast with Elisa Parenti. She is an award-winning journalist and storyteller with 30 years of experience. She's currently a news anchor and reporter for Bloomberg Radio and is the author of Betrayal, the Ethel Rosenberg story. We really get into this story a bit in the podcast, and it's super interesting. So a great episode to tune into next week on the Ellevate podcast.
Can't wait.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.